World News Sunday. Here's Forrest Sawyer.
Good evening. Secretary of State James Baker is in the Middle East tonight for what may be a critical mission, establishing with Washington's allies the ground rules for war. Iraq declared again today it is prepared to keep Kuwait at all costs, and Saudi Arabian newspapers are saying fighting appears imminent. Over the course of a week, Baker will visit 7 countries, but he began with a trip to eastern Saudi Arabia to see the American troops. ABC's John McWethy has more.
The first thing Secretary Baker did when he arrived in the Gulf was to get his picture taken with the people who are now at the leading edge of American policy here.
How are you, Captain? Doing good, sir. Is everything going all right? Doing fine, sir.
More than 4,000 soldiers from the 1st Cavalry Division, Fort Hood, Texas, were assembled in the 100-degree heat of the Saudi desert.
This is a long, long way from home, but I think that Americans are home wherever our principles are.
Perhaps as important as anything Baker does on this trip is his determination to present the image that the Bush administration is deadly serious about using the military option if Saddam Hussein refuses to withdraw from Kuwait. But when facing the troops that would have to do the fighting and the dying, Baker shied away from the kind of tough language that both he and the president have been using back home.
You ever going to go back to the beach? Hey, sir.
Most of Baker's business on this trip is being conducted in a setting quite different. Today, he met with officials from Bahrain. He is the first Secretary of State ever to visit this emirate off the coast of Saudi Arabia, where once plentiful oil has about run out. Here and elsewhere in the Gulf, Baker is carrying the message that the world must do more to isolate Saddam Hussein. He is challenging each country to back a United Nations resolution authorizing use of force against Iraq, challenging each government to say flat out where they will stand if there's a war. But as the Secretary left the troops earlier in the day, engulfed in their own dust, he had a fleeting glimpse of the conditions in which fighting would take place. The fighting that he and President Bush are now saying must be considered a real possibility. John McWethy, ABC News, in the Gulf.
Former Japanese Prime Minister Yasuhiro Nakasone met with Saddam Hussein in Baghdad today. Nakasone says he told Saddam all hostages must be released as soon as possible. When asked if he thought that was likely, Nakasone replied, "Only God knows." Still in the Middle East, for a second day, Israeli soldiers shot and wounded dozens of Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip during protests against the death of an Arab found hanged in an army jail cell. Nearly 200 Palestinians were wounded yesterday. An Israeli cabinet minister today rejected a UN-proposed international conference on protecting Palestinians, saying it would be a meeting of, quote, the world's biggest murderers. In India, battles between Hindus and Muslims have thrown the country into turmoil and left almost 200 people dead. The leader of a right-wing Hindu party is calling for a one-day general strike tomorrow and threatening to enforce it with violence. ABC's Mark Litke is there.
Angry mobs pitched battles with police, hundreds killed and wounded. Once again, religion in India gone mad, pushing the nation to the brink of chaos. For more than a week, thousands of militant Hindus have descended on the ancient town of Ayodhya, hoping to demolish this 16th century mosque. The Hindus claim it is built on the birthsite of their warrior god, Ram, and they want to build their own temple here. But the government, intent on protecting the site, holy to the nation's Muslim minority, has used clubs, tear gas, and live ammunition to stop them. And the confrontation has once again turned Hindu against Muslim in a nationwide eruption of communal violence. Some of the most serious since India's independence. More than 100 towns or districts are now under military curfew.
We've never had so much violence. We've never had issues which seem to defy any solution.
And it is not just the violence. Here in the Indian capital, the religious crisis now threatens to bring down the government as well. Prime Minister V.P. Singh has lost the support of the militant Hindu party that propped up his government and may have to resign. So politicians are now scrambling to form new alliances. Rajiv Gandhi could even return to power, though his Congress party lost in elections only 1 year ago. Meanwhile, many here blame the politicians for encouraging the violence for political ends.
The British played this card in their time, keeping the Hindu and the Muslim divided. And unfortunately, the politicians of post-independence India are doing exactly the same, trying to win votes.
So India continues as it began, an exotic land proud of its diverse cultural heritage, but a land where ethnic and religious passions are still easily inflamed, all too often with fatal consequences. Mark Litke, ABC News, New Delhi.
When we return, congressional elections. A longtime senator fights an unexpected challenge in Oregon. And later in the broadcast, Mary Martin, dead at the age of